Path of Achra is one of those unique games that might have flown under your radar, just like it did for me. I was surprised how quickly the game's build system pulled me in and had me wondering exactly what I could do. It's not the combat specifically that keeps me coming back, but instead it's the process of actually putting a build together, along with the reward of watching it pop off when all the pieces finally come together exactly as you had hoped. If you're somebody who enjoys experimenting with builds and discovering powerful synergies, then I think Path of Acra deserves your attention, and I'm hopeful that I can prove that to you today. Path of Acra is a traditional turn-based roguelike where every run starts with a new character and ends in either victory or death. It really reminds me of a game like Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup, but it has a much shorter runtime and many more character build options. Before your run even begins, you're going to choose between a culture, a class, and a religion, which will define your starting traits and give you an idea for the type of build you might want to try to go for. It's worth noting you are not forced into any kind of build based on your culture, class, or religion, but it's generally a nice kind of push in a direction in case you're not sure where to go. As you progress through your run, you'll level up, discover new equipment, and unlock new powers, which will gradually shape your build over time. Sometimes you'll know what build you're going for right off the bat, but other times the game might give you ideas in the form of gear that you weren't expecting to find that will have you asking questions about whether you should go one way or another based on what gear the game is giving you. Whether you win or lose your runs, you will unlock new cultures and new classes and new religions as you go along. It really doesn't take that long to unlock all the options available to you. Winning runs will have you advancing through the cycle system, which essentially just powers up the enemies and bosses on the next higher cycle, making it a more difficult run that requires a more refined build. On paper, none of that sounds especially unusual. What surprised me, though, was how all of these systems came together and really encouraged experimentation. When I first started playing Path of Acra, I was hit with probably the same realization that many of you might be upon first glance. When you look at it for the first time, it looks extremely confusing. But I was actually very surprised with how simple it was to jump in and start playing, and then learning how difficult the game is to actually master. It's the classic easy to learn, hard to master type scenario here. But it's easier to learn than expected because, again, upon first glance, everything just kind of looks like a mess. But when you start to understand where things are and what you need to do, it becomes much smoother to go through each run and then allow yourself to experiment with some of the more complicated aspects of the game. At first, you're really just either pressing tab or right click on your mouse to automatically move through the levels and destroy enemies without having to do much else. As you advance through enough levels, you'll start to move on to the next stage where you can select which route you would like to take based on what loot is available to you. And when you have an idea for what type of build you want to go for, you start chasing the path that offers loot that complements that build. So, for example, if you're going for a martial bleed build, then you're looking for gear that's going to synergize with martial or physical damage or bleed damage. It's really pretty much that simple. But sometimes the game won't give you anything that you're looking for, and you might feel that you need to pivot to a different direction. If you're getting all this really good fire gear, well, maybe you can try physical and fire and still have a successful run. Another really interesting thing about this game's gear system is the sacrifice mechanic. Basically, once you've found a piece of gear that fits your build, then any other piece of gear that would take that same slot can be sacrificed to power up that specific piece of gear. So you have pants, chest, gloves, helmet, and then either a main hand or offhand weapon, or if you're two-handing, then it's just the one weapon. So it also incentivizes you to find your gear early so that every piece of gear you find after that, you can sacrifice to power up that specific piece of gear. It's not really the best choice to pick up this piece of gear now because it seems okay and level it up a little bit, but then actually later find a piece that fits your build better, even though that will definitely happen. What you would prefer to do is understand the exact pieces of gear you're looking for, or at least within a certain type, like at least a certain element, for example, and then get that gear equipped either early so that you can sacrifice everything into it later, or even if you find it later on down the road, you might have banked up a certain amount of helmets, let's say, for example, that you can now pump into that specific helmet you just found that actually does fit your build. It creates a little bit of a sense of urgency in finding what you're looking for, because if you don't find it, then you're left with some sort of second option that might end up diluting the strength of your build. And of course, I have to talk about the power system as well that's in Path of Acra that you have much more control over, luckily, that allows you to fine tune your build exactly the way you want. As you gain levels, you gain points that you can spend into your list of powers. And the idea generally is to pick a couple columns of power or a couple specific elements that you want to focus into so that you can combine them into a prestige class later on to get the ultimate spike in power for that particular combination. And the game supports all types of combinations you can think of, and you don't even have to just go with two specific combos. You can mix in multiple or even just focus on one direct element if you want and still have a successful build. At first, these options might look a little bit confusing, but the more you play, you really start to understand, okay, this game has a certain system it likes to follow, and you'll find that, maybe not every element, but a number of elements will have some sort of self-healing mechanic, some sort of summon mechanic, some sort of armor mechanic, or maybe some blocking or some dodging. And again, not every element has everything, but the more you play, you start to realize, okay, this one works better with martial type builds because it allows me to wear heavy armor, whereas this one might prefer a lighter armor and maybe two specific elements that could work together. You'd be surprised what works. Like you can literally do a fire ice combo, which is very cool to look at and feels really rewarding when you actually succeed with it, which is not something I can say because when I tried that combo, I failed. But these different powers really give you the tools you need to build around what gear the game is giving you. So again, you might start a run wanting to do a fire ice combo, but the game might not give you the gear to support that kind of thing. So you have to be careful before you commit along certain paths and build around what you would like to do, but also tied in a little bit with what kind of gear is the game giving you so that you don't end up waiting too long and die before you find the specific weapon you want or the specific chest piece or whatever the case may be. Additionally, there's a number of buffs and debuffs that you want to keep your eye on as well and get to know. Sometimes you can make a whole build around these types of mechanics as well. So something like meditate or inflame is something you'll want to look out for as far as buffs go. And for debuffs, things like scorch, doom, plague, and a number of other ones available as well. These can be found on pieces of gear or different things that the enemies can do to you, or even in your own power tree as well. So keep an eye out for those status effects, let's call them, and get to understand how they work, and that will give you an easier time in the game as well. Also, when you level up, you get the ability to choose either a strength, dexterity, willpower, or vitality attribute to put a point into. And this will help fine tune your build even further. If you're going for a physical damage type build, then obviously strength is something you're going to be really focusing a lot on, maybe with a mix of vitality to keep your health up. But if you're going for a speed and a dodgy type build, then you're going to be focusing on dexterity. But it's not always exactly that simple because, especially for these speed type builds, you still need to have a certain amount of strength to wear the gear that you're trying to wear so that your dodge rating and speed rating is not hindered by being over encumbered. You also have to watch out for inflexibility, which is a little weird, but generally just the lighter gear and the lighter weapons you use, the better chance that you fulfill the inflexibility quota. But if you're going for a power strength build, you don't have to worry at all about encumbrance or inflexibility. In fact, some gear and some powers will actually be even more powerful the more encumbered and the more inflexible you are. So just keep an eye out for that. Willpower will generally help increase your self-healing effects as well as your summons. So you can summon more allies the higher your willpower is. If you're going for a summon build, then you want to make sure that you have enough willpower to manage the amount of summons you want to do. Generally, what I found was that I would either focus on strength or dexterity and then get enough willpower if I had summons in order to support that or to support my self healing. And every once in a while, put a point into vitality because not only does it increase your maximum health by a greater amount than just putting a point into strength, but it will also cleanse you of all debuffs and shoot your health up to 100%. So if you're about to die and you gain a level, you can save yourself by putting a point in vitality, and that can become very useful. I haven't even talked about the prayer system yet, which is a system provided by the religion that you choose. Each religion will offer you three prayers, and depending on the flavor text of the religion you choose, those prayers will do something or another thing. They might heal you, they might help you summon more enemies, they might buff your strength, they might cleanse debuffs. There's a whole bunch of different things these prayers can do. I found that the prayers were never really part of the build I was going for. They just kind of either supported it or didn't. I'm sure you can get right into the weeds and find a specific religion that really boosts up a particular build you're going for. That's something I didn't feel the need to do, but I didn't get to the absolute end of the game either. So that's just another thing you can consider. All these different prayers, how they support your build. I do want to circle back around to the gear discussion a little bit because even though I touched on it, I didn't quite get the point across as to how interesting the gear is and how it really shapes your run. There's a whole bunch of different gear pieces that you'll start to recognize the more you play, but what I found the most interesting about it is the different combinations they have with each other. So you'll find some gear that says something like, for every bit of fire damage you do, convert some of that damage into lightning damage, or vice versa. For every bit of lightning damage, convert some into fire, or whatever. For every type of psychic, convert it into ice. For every martial, convert it into blood. That's one simple idea, but it goes even deeper than that as well. And that's where the fun really is, I find. You know, you have full control over what powers you choose, what race, culture, religion you choose, and the idea that you want to go for when you set out on a new run. But as mentioned, the gear is really what's going to determine how that run actually plays out. And your willingness to risk waiting to find the perfect piece or to make a concession and try to go with something that's close enough to what you were aiming for, or something that actually you didn't even think about that's an even better idea than what you initially set out for. I can't really go into every single combination or every single idea that these gear pieces will give you, but if you are giving this game a shot, really focus on that because you'll start to see what I'm talking about here. I wanted to show you guys some builds that I went for that ended in success and also ended in failure, so you can get an idea of the types of ideas you can come up with, and I'm sure you could come up with much better ones than I did. One of the first successful wins I got was using a poison bleed build, which I thought was really neat because it was constant damage over time, and the poison and bleed damage I was doing was healing me back, and it created some pretty cool chain reactions. I also went for a warlock summon build that I think could have been successful if I had played it a little smarter, but it was still a neat idea to try out and something that I'd like to try to fine tune in the future. I've got this interesting heavy armor pugilist poison build. So he's like a fist guy, only using bare fists to do poison damage with his heavy armor and poise and be able to win that way. That was a pretty successful run. And I've also got this really cool goblin assassin build where we utilized martial damage and agility with death damage and some necromancy to feel honestly about as powerful as I've ever felt. The problem is I didn't have any proper cleansing mechanics on my build, so I ended up getting stacked up with so much Scorch that no matter how much self-healing I had, it still managed to just destroy me because of all the debuffs that I had that I wasn't able to cleanse. Probably my most favorite build, unfortunately I don't have footage for, was a lightning speed Tengu who every step he took he was firing off lightning damage. It was much different than the heavy armor type build that I was used to at the beginning. This guy was incredibly agile and every step he took would just fire lightning damage off everywhere. It looked really cool, but unfortunately I didn't actually record that footage. Every run I did after that run I recorded because that's when I realized, okay, this game is worth my time. And again, that's just some of what you can do here. I did mess around with a fire and ice build that failed and a couple other builds as well. There are many options. I didn't even touch astral or psychic. So there's still much more for me to explore, but you get the gist from seeing these types of builds that are available. However, just because the game works so well for me, it does not mean that it is a game for absolutely everybody. First off, I think you can tell right away whether the graphics will do it for you or not. It's a very distinct graphic style that I don't think everybody will love, but I still think it's something that can be easily looked past, even if it's not your favorite thing, if you do enjoy the mechanics of the game. Furthermore, the runs are a little bit on the long side, although I did compare this game to Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup earlier, which has immensely longer runs than this game ever would. Each run will run you between probably 45 minutes if you're fast to about an hour and a half if you are theory crafting and figuring out your build as you go along. That can be a little bit long for some people, so keep that in mind. Additionally, I think after you've done a number of runs, you will start to see behind the curtain a little bit and start to understand the ideas that the dev was going for when putting together these builds. And I do think that after a certain period, a period that I have not reached yet, to be clear, but after a certain period, you might start to fail to be surprised about what's out there, and you'll start to know exactly what gear pieces you're looking for because you know you've seen them before and you know exactly what you need for this particular build. So it becomes a little bit less mysterious over time as you familiarize yourself with the power tree and all the different gear that's out there. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to get wins, and it doesn't mean that you still can't come up with a countless amount of different builds that you might not have tried before. But again, after you've done a number of runs, I think you'll see what I mean, where you've seen this gear before, you've been down these power trees before, and you're no longer surprised about what you can do, at least to some degree. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, actually, but the point is that the options are not endless. The gear is not endless. That's the point I'm trying to get across here. Well, with that said, I think if you made it to this point of the video, you already know whether or not Path of Achra will be for you. I do want to mention it is a very affordable game, $13 Canadian at full price. I picked it up for half price during the Steam Summer Sale. It strikes me as one of those games that probably does go on sale reasonably often, so give it a wish list and keep an eye out for that if you're not so sure that you want to jump into it right away. I also wanted to mention that this game was put on my radar as a result of a recommendation in the comments on one of my previous videos. I wanted to point that out because I want you guys to know that every single recommendation you guys make, I at least Google search it and check it out and see if it really is a game that I would like to look into and maybe even possibly make a video about. Not every recommendation is going to fit my style in particular, but when I saw this one and it happened to be on sale, I picked it up pretty much right away. And I was surprised that I was going to make a video on it so quickly, but that's what happens sometimes. You get struck by inspiration, somebody points out a really cool game, and all of a sudden I spent almost an entire week playing only this game. So it ended up in a video like this. So that is my blessing for you to continue to provide recommendations. It's one of my favorite comments to read, among all the other amazing comments as well, of course. So just thank you very much for the recommendation, for the comments. I really appreciate it if you've made it to this point of the video. I am blown away by the support my videos have been getting recently, so thank you so much. If you want to see more videos in this style in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit like on this video, and I'll see you in the next one.